Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman and thanks for joining us. On the show tonight,
I was never a major player. I was just a person who survived to tell a story.
a conversation with Rev Wheeler Parker Jr. and Chris Benson, who co-authored a new book about the decades-long search for justice for teenage lynching victim Emmett Till. When Dr. King came to Chicago in 1966, his mission was to fight for fair and affordable housing. We talk about where that fight stands today. Black students are leaving CPS and heading to private, parochial, and charter schools. We explore why. And a documentary on the victory for reparations in Evanston is set to air on WTTW. We meet one of its subjects. All that coming up, but our first story tonight, the last living witness to the Emmett Till lynching tells his story right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
As the country honors Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy this week, a book about a seminal event in American history, an event that deeply motivated Dr. King's fight for civil rights, was released. In A Few Days of Trouble, Revelations on the Journey to Justice for My Cousin and Best Friend Emmett Till, Reverend Wheeler Parker Jr. gives a first-hand account of those terrible days. With his co-author, Christopher Benson, he also gives an inside look at the decades of investigations into Till's lynching. I sat down with Reverend Parker and Chris Benson to talk about why they say Emmett Till's story must continue to be told. In the book, you tell about Dr. T.R.M. Howard, who went around telling the story of Emmett Till's lynching and the trial in the weeks after it happened, after his death, and after the trial. We know, of course, that he housed Mamie Till Mobley and others in Mississippi. How did the speeches that he went around giving, Chris, how did those influence Dr. King and then the movement?
You know, the fascinating story about Dr. T.R.M. Howard is that he headed an organization in Mississippi that was actually bigger than the NAACP at the time, in the 1950s. And he was quite influential at the start of the mass movement. He would go out and talk about the Emmett Till case, which he participated in, not only in housing the visitors from out of town, including Mamie Till Mobley, some of the reporters, the black reporters who couldn't stay anywhere else. But he gave speeches, and one of those was at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, and in attendance was Rosa Parks and, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Reverend Parker, of course, we know a lot has been written in the years about Emmett Till. You were the last living witness, of course, to his kidnapping and to this crucial part of American history. What do you want people to take away from your story?
Like I said, so much has been said. And so I'm hoping that being eyewitness, and Mark Twain said eyewitness will destroy the story, hoping that I could get someone to believe me as being truthful, not just I allege. And that's what they said after 30 years waiting to interview me. They said I allege. So hope I can bring some truth to the story.
A lot of the story, you spend time, of course, working to clear your cousin's name. Tell me about that and why that's important for you.
Right away, after he was killed, I read the Look magazine piece, and that disturbed me and has disturbed me for 67 years, how they portrayed him. And so I had to live with that, the portrayal that they gave of him all of these years. And that's the thing I want most to see done.
One part that I found interesting is that section of the book when you all discuss the Look magazine piece and how, obviously it was famous because it revealed the confessions of J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant, but it also revealed a lot about the way of life at the time and the way people thought. Tell me about that, please.
If you didn't live during that time or experience it, all you can have is imagination. But during that time, you had absolutely no protection. You could be killed, and it's hard to imagine that people were killed for reckless eyeball. And that's the kind of conditions we lived on. You say, why did we stay? But we mostly stayed to ourselves, and people got along well because we followed the tradition, the Southern mores, and there was a relationship. And
Reckless eyeball.
Yeah, reckless eyeball. You get killed for reckless eyeball.
Which is just bothering to look at a white person.
Yeah, exactly, a white woman.
A white woman in particular.
And America has protected that system to the end. Even now, it's still being protected.
Emmett Till, the story of Emmett Till is about more than Emmett Till. As horrible as his lynching was, it's about the expression of power in this country. And one of the things we try to include in this book is the context for the story. Yes, the facts, are there. Wheeler Parker's, horrible life after that in dealing with this, in enduring pain of the traumatic memory, but also the political context of it. And we have to see this in that context. Emmett Till and Wheeler Parker Jr. went down to Mississippi just after Brown versus Board of Education was decided, and white people in the Delta were up in arms, thinking they were going to have to share power now, respect equality among black people, and they were pushing back. That's the environment that Emmett Till walked into, unprepared for that.
Chris, you also document in this book sort of the pathway to two laws that you all, the family activists, worked on, both the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act and the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, which was just passed recently. Tell me about the importance of both of those.
For one thing, it's important to have people in power make a statement with these kinds of laws, that the crimes that the laws address are not going to be accepted, they're not going to be tolerated. In the 1950s, obviously, it was a different environment. So the statement of the laws is important, but the enforcement of the laws also is important. And symbolically, we see some significance in the fact that these two laws carry Emmett Till's name, because from now on, whenever anybody is charged under these laws, it'll be Emmett Till speaking, right? That's his legacy. His legacy is that he can accuse people now of the horrible crimes that he had to suffer through. And so we think that's important also. It's a statement. It's a statement at a time when I think we need that kind of statement.
You write a little bit about, in the early days after his death, struggling with talking about it. And you never really stepped up to speak up until mid-'80s when Mamie Till Mobley asked you to. Mm-hmm. What changed that made you, A, start speaking about it, but then obviously, how do you find the strength to keep speaking about it all this time, right? The determination.
And from the beginning, there was no need whatsoever to speak about it, because there was Mamie out there. They were traveling, doing it, my grandfather, and they're going all over. So there's no need for us. We didn't want to be interviewed, but 30 years later, when we were interviewed, it was just so mind-boggling that they said, we allege, I said, I allege, and I said, but I'm an eyewitness. What do you mean allege, So I found out the first impressions are lasting, and you feel so helpless in trying to get the truth out.
As said, it was painful to see how Emmett Till was described by someone who couldn't possibly have known him, and playing on the stereotypes of a young black kid coming out of Chicago. So those are the kinds of things we attempt to correct, to humanize Emmett Till, to show what we lost with respect to his precious life and the gifts that he had to share with the world, and to use that as a representative case of what racism has cost us in this country.
Let's take a beat on that for a moment and talk about Emmett Till. You all were best friends growing up. Who was he? You called him Bobo.
Yeah. Fun-loving, prankster. Then he had a dull day in his life, center of attraction. With all the stuttering, he still was a center of attraction. I say he's a typical Leo. Yeah, it's innate. The stuff was there, He would have been a leader by any society he would have been in, wherever he would have gone. He's a natural leader, definitely.
Reverend Parker, you write about, being obviously the last witness, right? Your Uncle Simeon left us some years ago, and kind of feeling like the last man standing in, obviously the last man standing as far as the people who were there to witness what happened, but in the fight for justice, and particularly for him. Considering the uprisings that we've seen over the last few years and the marches and the demonstrations and the fights, do you still feel, sort of like the last man standing fighting for justice?
I had not thought about it until people started saying it, because 67 years, there's so many stories being told. His mother was here for a long time, and it just fell to me without any giving any thought that this could happen, and all of a sudden realizing that I am the last person. It just fell on my shoulders, and the story's not hard to tell because I lived it, so there's no problem there. So I never gave it much thought in terms of being the last person. I never gave much thought that people wanted to hear the story until I felt and found out how much it meant to people to talk to someone that was actually there. Because it didn't imprint on me like that, because it never did. Because I was never a major player. I was just a person who survived to tell the story.
Reverend Parker, last question to you. What does justice for Emmett Till look like for you?
Wow, that's a big question. A lot of thought. What does it look like? Justice for, in our sense, is to serve humanity. I think about all the things that come about because of his death. At the same time, I go back to the way he died, how he suffered, the screaming, the beating, And it makes me think, was a pleasure, worth the strain, to have all these bills and things named after him. So it's kind of a mixed emotion I have, but we're content that everybody reap what they sow. We're people of faith, and we believe the Bible, we practice it, and that's what we live by.
And congratulations on the book and its release, and thank you again.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
An honor to speak with them both. And our thanks to the Emmett Till Memorial Center in Summit, Illinois for hosting us for that conversation. Again, the book is called A Few Days of Trouble, Revelations on the Journey to Justice for My Cousin and Best Friend, Emmett Till. You can see an excerpt on our website. The town of Evanston made history in 2021 when it became the first municipality in the U.S. to pass an official government reparations program for Black residents. That victory is placed alongside a contemporaneous national effort in the documentary, The Big Payback. We spoke with the former Evanston alderwoman who led the push for reparations about the documentary, which is set to air on WTTW.
The Big Payback is a documentary centering the complexities of advancing reparations, specifically local reparations, while also paralleling the work that's happening on a national level under the leadership of Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee as she advances H.R. 40. It was a very special honor to be able to share in full transparency what it's like to be a local leader while working a job, managing family, sometimes multiple generations of your family's children and parents. I'm grateful that I've been able to do that because I've seen how it has inspired other local leaders to lead and take action in their own communities. So my hope is that folks see the documentary and the very next step is an action that is measurable, setting a SMART goal that is attainable, reaching out for a collaborator and making a difference in the goals for reparative justice, for reparations, for empowering Black communities, for liberating Black communities, overcoming histories, our history of harm, our history of crimes against the humanity of Black people, and other historic and current injustices that we deal with today.
And the Big Payback premieres on WTTW January 16th at 10 p.m. Up next, carrying on Dr. King's legacy in the fight for affordable housing. When Martin Luther King Jr. came to Chicago in 1965, his mission was to end the slum housing conditions many Black residents were forced to live in. For 17 months, he fought with boycotts, rallies, and marches. During a march in the all-white Marquette Park neighborhood, King was infamously struck in the head with a rock. While King gained some concessions from then-Mayor Richard J. Daley, his Chicago campaign was a spark that led to the passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968, not long after his assassination. Nearly 6 decades later, however, housing advocates say Chicago still is struggling to provide adequate and affordable housing to all of its residents. Joining us now with more are Abraham Lacey, President and CEO of the Far South Community Development Corporation, Joanne Kenner, President of London Townhouses, a Southside housing cooperative, and Robin Moore, Director of Holistic Social Services at Lawndale Christian Legal Center. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Joanne Kenner, starting with you, please. You're the president of a cooperative housing development on the South Side, London Townhouses, as we've said, built not long after Dr. King was in Chicago. Give us a sense of what it was like for a Black Chicagoan to find housing at the time.
Oh, it was a breath of fresh air. As you know, redlining was taking place. You had a specific area that Black people could live in on the South or the West Side. Many of the neighborhoods that we can live in now were not available to us. And at the time, I was a young married girl just coming out of college, and London Townhouses had some model homes, and it was like a suburb. And I didn't understand cooperative housing at that time. It was just really a nice place to get started with, you know, with living as a married person.
So you're saying it was a breath of fresh air to be able to find that because it was
Yes.
so challenging to find housing anywhere else in the city.
There were all kind of cut-up kitchenettes and those kinds of things. It was really bad.
Right, and obviously you're still in London Townhouses, so it's worked out for you. We're going to come back to that in a bit. Abraham Lacey, set the stage for us today, though. What is the state of affordable housing in Chicago from your perspective?
Affordable housing is still a crisis, especially in the Black and brown communities. We are still 150,000 units short of affordable housing. It seems like now there's more effort to build in affluent areas. There was a study that was done that more than about 50 years ago, about 70% of the housing developments were built for working class families. Now, contrast that for today, it's now only 8% because we're only building in areas where, you know, mostly affluent is living right now. And so we have a lot of work. There's been some strides that's been made. There's been some investments that have been made, especially through the most recent investment from the Mayor Lightfoot. But we have such a long way to go in terms of reckoning this affordable housing.
I would imagine when it was 17%, that wasn't enough at the time either.
Exactly.
Robin Moore, you work with a population that has historically had a hard time finding housing, people who have been incarcerated. What are the barriers to housing that they typically encounter?
So definitely being justice involved, right? You're already dealing with your criminal records, your background, that for many landlords, it become a fear to house those coming out of the justice system. And really, it just adds to the barriers for them to be able to access.
Joanne Kenner, explain for us, if you would, the co-op model and why people might want to investigate it more as an option for affordable housing.
Well, we call it having a house without the hassle. And one of the best kept secrets, I think, is cooperative housing. We're not-for-profit. Our mission statement is to provide housing, attractive and affordable housing to low and moderate income families, and whatever constitutes a family these days. So that's what we do, and our members, you're a member of a corporation first. It's London Townhouses Cooperative Incorporated. So our members buy they buy a share into the corporation, and as a member of the corporation, they have they're stockholders, and they have a say in the governance and the running of the cooperative.
For example, as president, you were elected by your neighbors.
I was elected by the membership, yes.
Okay. Abraham Lacey, your organization working to get more housing built on the South Side, how would you grade its efforts? You just mentioned a second ago, some of the city's efforts with Invest Southwest. How would you grade the city's efforts with that?
Well, I think there's a If I were to assign a letter grade to it, it would be more of a B at this point, because they are trying to make some sort of significant stride. I mean, these are decades of issues that you have to sort of unravel. But I can still say that it's still challenging to get affordable housing done, as opposed to what the other sort of style of housing on the north side. It is still very challenging, but it's worth the sort of risk to do it. Because when we're decimating our communities out of affordable housing, you start to lose amenities in the neighborhood. We start to lose density. We lost an entire ward because of the lack of population, because we don't have adequate housing. So when you lose the affordable housing for the working class, you start to lose neighborhood amenities, which are the grocery stores, which are the parks, which are the public libraries, the public schools. All of those get affected. And when you don't focus on those things, then the community's going to start collapsing.
Robin, given the economic divide in Chicago, why should wealthier residents with more stable housing, why should they care about affordable housing access for lower and middle income residents?
Well, what I was saying, and even with the justice-involved population in mind, that when you're without housing, definitely you're dealing with those mental stressors that you otherwise would not have. And that's why, just listening to the other panelists, I am super excited about hearing about some of the efforts and things that they're doing to ensure and help increase the affordable housing here in the city of Chicago. I know at LCLC, we're grateful that we're partnered with the Chicago Low Income Housing Trust Fund, where we're able to work with them and get our individuals into the housing that they need. And I even go on to say, it's nothing like seeing a young man and even a young man and his family who's out of the system walk into that first apartment and be given the keys to that apartment. Because what it does is it literally changes the trajectory of their life and the direction that they're headed in.
The stabilizing factor, obviously. Abraham Lacey, we've got about a minute left. What would you like to see done? What would you like to see the city do to increase the affordable housing stock?
Well, for one, they need to put more money into the New Homes for Chicago program to get more single-family housing development. The other is that there needs to be more collaboration with not only the city, so the burden shouldn't just be on the city. It should be on the county, it should be on the state, and also the federal government, and also our philanthropic partners as well as our investors. Those sort of collaborations is what's going to be more intuitive to get more resources in terms of affordable housing. That's the only way this is going to work. These sort of cherry-pick projects that we do in one little area, in one little location, it's not going to make the difference. If you don't get a significant amount of investment, as you see in other parts of the city, in more affluent areas, you got to do the same thing in terms of affordable housing in the South and West Side.
Got it. Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to our guests, Joanne Kenner, Abraham Lacey, and Robin Moore. Thanks, all of you. Chicago Public Schools is working to combat declining enrollment and funding challenges. A significant number of low-income families of color are choosing to leave the district. In partnership with Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, we explore why on our website, WTTW.com/news. Here's journalist and Northwestern professor Ava Thompson Greenwell with a part of that story.
Blair Flowers, a mother of 5, chose to keep her 3-year-old son in his neighborhood school, but moved her 15-year-old to a charter school. Flowers says her Austin neighborhood schools no longer offer as many educational opportunities as when she was a student at Austin Community Academy 20 years ago. Flowers says she feels the charter school offers more opportunities for her daughter.
They have the Phoenix Pack, which is a program that helps students who keep their GPA up and they're doing good in school. They pay for college.
Flowers, an Austin resident, rushes 6 miles to North Lawndale after dropping off her son.
I have to drop him off here and then hurry up and get her to North Lawndale so she can be on time, and most of the time I don't make it.
According to Carmona, it's not uncommon for parents to literally go the extra mile.
Many of our families, unfortunately, are willing to travel 10, 15 miles to go to a school because there's the perception that the school in the neighborhood is not good enough.
And you can see the full story produced in partnership with students at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism on our website. And that's our show for tonight. Visit WTTW.com/news for the very latest from WTTW News. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for joining us this evening. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.